What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan, and today I am looking ahead and previewing the upcoming PFL card. It's PFL 7 2023. The playoffs get underway on the 4th this weekend, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. You know where to find it. ESPN Plus over in America, DAZN here in Ireland, and check your local listings around the world for everywhere else to find it. It's a PFL season that has, I suppose, been crazy in so many different ways, with obviously a lot of people in the drug test failures, people falling out, but also with big shocks of Brennan Loughnane losing and lots of different things that have gone on. There's injuries as well. Mavlid is out now as well. It has been a wild and interesting and insane PFL season so far. Do you know the one thing that I really like though about this PFL season is that I think especially at like 205 pounds, but it also has the potential to happen at everywhere. It's someone who, like, we didn't think was going to win it is going to win it. And when I say it, I mean £1 million. Because like that at the end of the day is the joy of all of these, right? And back in the start of the World Series of Fighting, as it was back in the day, or the PFL, when you're like, am I going to get into this? Is this something that's going to be for me? And then you see at the end of it, someone's handed over that that big massive check by a RSF or whoever it might be, handing it over at the end for the £1 million. It's like, well, like, one of the biggest issues in mixed martial arts is pay, and people not getting paid enough. But then there's, and £1 million at the end of it for someone to win a few fights. It's not bad, is it? It's not bad. And then we saw recently as well the pay had actually come out for how much they're earning per fight, and that's pretty good as well. So, it's good stuff from PFL. You have to hand it to them on that. Now we'd look with the maybe the bottom guys in the card in PFL or Bellator or the UFC, even everywhere, should be getting more. Would we hope they'd be getting more? Yes, but still, they're putting a lot of money into it. And I love that. Like the fact that, say, someone like Impa Kasanganay, who was in the UFC but came out and wasn't even supposed to be in this, he could win $1 million. Martin Hamlet could win $1 million. Gabriel, Alves, Braga could win $1 million. I just think that's great. I think that's absolutely fantastic. And look, that can happen every year. And we've seen people, win $1 million, and now we think, well, sure, they're good fighters. Of course, they, but at the time, maybe they weren't. Maybe someone like Anente Delia or Bruno Capoloza and things like that. So, it's that to me is one of the standout reasons why you should tune into PFL, and and the finale card as well is always fantastic. So, let's get into this card. Just before we start, I suppose, as I did mention, Mavlid is out through injury. He was supposed to fight Gabriel Alves Braga, as I mentioned. His place will be taken by Chris Wade, and we'll get into that fight in a second. But it's interesting, the 145-pound the division, it is kind of, two old school guys of the PFL against kind of maybe two of the new school, and not necessarily new school. Funnily enough, Pinedo has a fight more than Bubba Jenkins, one fight more than Bubba Jenkins, a very similar record, but new school in terms of the PFL and getting into the playoffs and all of that, which is in itself very interesting. Like, could we have a Bubba Jenkins Chris Wade matchup? It feels like that matchup has happened about 12 times before, but and still, like, even if it did happen again, there's all that history. Could we have Pinedo against Braga, a brand new matchup? And as I said, the elixir of the $1 million then will be absolutely fascinating in that, or there could be some sort of mix another way in through it. It's a tough one to call, to be honest, these two fights, because you look at the prices. Even Bubba Jenkins is minus 400. Now, when I saw that price, I was like thinking, that looks, and I'm recording this earlier in the week, obviously, because we're only a few days out from PFL here, but that price really could change the closer we get to that card. Jesus, Pinedo is plus 300. Then the Braga and Wade fight is as close as I thought it would be. Braga minus 145, Wade plus 115. So I suppose we'll take them one at a time, but like, putting them together, it's mad that Chris Wade comes in here short notice enough. And he is, he's not the favorite, but he's not that much of an underdog. Let's say he does win this, right? You're looking at the finale coming up as well, and like thinking, okay, maybe he has a bit of a, maybe a little bit of an advantage there. If he didn't put in a full camp here, there's a little bit of less wear and tear on the body, especially if he comes through the fight, maybe not as unscathed or a little bit less scathed. Is that a phrase? Then the other side of it could be adventure, but you never know what's going to happen in the fight as well. But I think them lines are very, very interesting. But to the fights themselves, let's talk about Bubba Jenkins versus Pinedo. First of all, we've seen Bubba over the last while, and I think it's been not necessarily a change to how he fights, but I think a real change in mentality. His nickname here, Sherdog, I'm a bad man, Bubba Jenkins, and he has become that bad man over the last few fights. I mentioned the Chris Wade fight, which has obviously happened. What is it now? Twice. They've only fought twice, so maybe the trilogy, and it's 1-1. So if that trilogy did happen, there you go. But he lost to Brendan Loughnane, in the playoffs last year, or the finale last year. And after that, you were kind of thinking, like, would the PFL even kind of keep him on? He's been good for the PFL, won some good fights and been in some good fights, and always puts on a show, I suppose, and puts on a good even if his opponent wins or whatever, he puts on a good show against the opponent. But they stuck by him, and he came in there and he beat Chris Wade. I thought he looked very good in that. And then the Sun Binjo fight, he finished him off pretty early and looked absolutely fantastic in that fight altogether. But he is a guy, I think, who loves, if he can, to dominate you. And you might say, okay, that's the same shot for every fighter. What are you talking about? But he is the type of guy that loves, like, he fought Lance Palmer one stage and wrestled him, and you could see that is exactly what he wants to do. Like, not John Jones-esque in terms of, like, if you see someone's a striker, he wants to outstrike them. If you see someone's a wrestler, he wants to out-wrestle them. Jenkins is happy enough to do it in his own way, which is a lot of the time is wrestling, but he seems to, like, if he gets that head start, and if he gets on top of you, it's very hard to claw it back from Bubba Jenkins. And when you're fighting a southpaw as well, it's a little bit more awkward as he is a southpaw. And the way he strikes as well, I'm a big fan of it. Like, he jumps in with that striking, and you wouldn't teach it maybe necessarily the way he does it, but it's a very effective the way that he strikes, and he looks very smooth when he does it. Very, very smooth the way he strikes. And you saw it, like, especially in the last two fights. I think it's funny, Bubba Jenkins is one of these guys that when he was young and maybe, came into Bellator after 3 fights, a lot of people were talking about him back in, what was it, 2013 now. It's a long time ago. It's a decade ago. We're talking about him as a possible champion over there. And then, for one reason or another, it didn't happen, even though he beat some very good guys. Like, he beat Coyote Yamauchi, who's probably, like, he's not the number one contender now, but after Jason Jackson, he's probably number one contender. But he, it wasn't just him. He beat some other good guys as well. And, he lost Georgi Harhanyan twice, and there's no shame in that. But, like, it did feel like he lost, the second night Harhanyan went out and then lost over an ACB. And you're kind of thinking at that stage, he took obviously a lot of money to fight over there. And you're thinking, like, well, maybe that's it from Bubba Jenkins, but it feels like the late surge, the PFL signing, has really helped him. Like, he's only lost 2 fights in since that loss. I spoke about in ACB in 2017, and they've been to Chris Wade and Loughnane last year. He's beaten some very good fighters. The aforementioned Lance Palmer win, Chris Wade again, Ryoji Kudo amongst others. So I think for Bubba Jenkins, and just aside from the fight for a second again, like, this is massive for Bubba Jenkins. Like, this is a career changer. It's absolutely huge. I think it's absolutely huge, and I think he knows that as well. The way he fights, the mentality change. I think he knows that, but he'll have no easy jaunt to the final, I suppose, against Jesus Pinedo. You know, another southpaw, which, you know, I said earlier, being a southpaw makes it awkward for the opponents, but when it's southpaw versus southpaw, it's a different sort of dynamic, because I've heard people talking about this before, and they're like, you know, if you're an orthodox fighter, you're used to fighting orthodox fighters, and you have to kind of change things around if you're fighting a southpaw fighter. But if you're a southpaw fighter, you're also used to fighting orthodox fighters. So when you have to fight a southpaw guy, you have to kind of turn around. Now, I think in mixed martial arts, it's a little bit less pronounced maybe than boxing and stuff, and there are more southpaws, I would say. Now, that's pure conjecture. I haven't looked at the numbers or anything, but I would assume so. There seems to be a lot of southpaws in mixed martial arts, so maybe it's a little bit easier. But still, there is that adjustment for a southpaw versus southpaw fight. Pinedo, as we saw against Brendan Loughnane, is an absolute hitter. He can hit you hard, and once you hit you stay hit. It's very interesting that I said it earlier on. I looked at his record, you know, and he's one fight more than Bubba Jenkins, and that tells you how long he's been around. You know, he had a couple of UFC fights. Even he fought John McDessie and others, which people maybe might kind of forget. But he's been fighting as well for a decade, since 2013, and you know, maybe not as in as glamorous places as Bubba Jenkins, but still he's been putting in that work, and he has been, I suppose, earning his way, and he hasn't lost many fights throughout that decade. And I'm telling you, once he got to that Loughnane spot, I think a lot of people, maybe even myself included, not necessarily wrote him off, but we're saying, look, this is Brendan Loughnane time now. This is not your time, you know. And for Pinedo, he was like, this is my time. This is absolutely my time. And he showed that. He really showed that in that fight. And it's a tough matchup coming in for Jenkins, because I was looking at my notes for the last fight, and one of the things I had written is like that odd movement on the outside, and that's what really hurt Loughnane in that fight. Now, it didn't go on too long, as we all know, but what Loughnane loves, and funnily enough what Bubba Jenkins loves as well, is kind of preying a little bit on straight up technical fighters, because they move a bit oddly on the outside, but not as odd as Pinedo. So I wonder, like, and look, unfortunately for Brendan Loughnane, but fortunately for Bubba Jenkins, it's not that the trick is up, but like, we've seen that now. Like I said it coming in, that like his odd movement can cause trouble on the outside. It caused trouble, and if you're going back and looking at the last fight of your opponent, you're thinking, okay, what happened there? He did a bit of odd movement. He beat the guy who likes to kind of change stances and move through it in the middle of a kind of a stance change. I can't let that happen. And I think that's a massive key here. Just on Pinedo then, but the rest of his game, I suppose, he's lovely low kicks, but I think one thing he does with the low kicks, he leaves himself a little bit open, and I think Bubba Jenkins will prey on that a little bit, because as I said, he jumps in with that striking, and that's exactly what you want. When you're that sort of fighter, you want a guy who low kicks and leaves himself open. But like that wide stance that he kind of fights out of, it's very good for big head kicks, very good for body kicks. He whips in those kicks. He uses his size well as well. He's kind of side kicks and all that. But when you're doing that sort of thing against a fighter like Bubba Jenkins, you have to be very careful. I said, you know, he whips in his kicks, and you need to whip him. Like, whip him in, but whip him out just as quick. Don't let Bubba Jenkins catch it, because Bubba, we've seen him in the past. He'll fall down on a low kick, pick it up, hold on to it, and take you down, no problem. Like, Bubba Jenkins is very, very, very good at that. Like, really good at that. So if you're Pinedo, you have to watch that, and you have to like not let yourself fall prey of it. So it's an interesting matchup. Like, if Bubba Jenkins or Pinedo, first of all, if Pinedo can land those kicks, doesn't get caught by those kicks, and continues to kind of fight on the outside with his brilliant movement, and he can't be timed by Bubba, he'll win the fight. Like, there's no doubt about it. He'll either land a big shot, or he'll outround him, outpoint him. But if Bubba Jenkins can time one of those kicks, catch it, take him down, it's going to be a tough night. And it's not just one takedown, it's multiple takedowns, multiple chain wrestling endeavors in there. it's going to be a really tough night for Pinedo, I think. And honestly, I'm usually one who picks the striker, to be honest, but I think I'm picking Bubba Jenkins here now. Maybe my bets will reflect that differently because I think that price is way too wide, but I am going for Bubba Jenkins to win that one. Right, let's talk about the next 145 pounds fight while we're here, and that is obviously Gabriel Braga versus Chris Wade, coming in at short notice. It's funny, you know, when someone falls out of the playoffs or doesn't get into the playoffs, you're thinking, they're coming off a loss, but he's not. He beat Ryoji Kudo in one round in his last fight and was maybe obviously a little bit unlucky not to get in. He also lost to Bernard Knockdown last year, lost to Bubba Jenkins earlier this year in that rematch I spoke about as well. But, you know, it's only been very good fighters and championship level fighters he's been losing to over the last while. Tim lost to Mavlid, lost to like Rabzabov, Nathan Schultz a couple of times as well. And it was Islam Makhachev and Rustem Khabilov back in the UFC, you know, 7 years ago before that, where you can find a loss. And, you know, being in, I suppose, the early days of the PFL in 2018 and whatnot, he maybe didn't have the highest caliber of opponents, but I think it's been improving all the time. You know, with the likes of Mavlid, Bubba, Kyle Boschnek, Lance Palmer, Brendan Loughnane, Ryoji Kudo. He hasn't fought anyone bad in the last few years, you know, and it just goes to show you how much I suppose the PFL has improved. And then for Braga, as I said, you know, maybe some of the new school coming in, 25 years of age, 11-0, obviously beat Marlon Moraes pretty handily in his last fight. And look at his wins before that, though. Who's the one before that? Jesus Pinedo. You know, we talk about rematches. There could be another rematch in the finale as well. And that was a split decision, a close fight as well. And well, obviously, if that turns out to be the finale, we'll be going back and looking at that with a fine tooth comb. But you know, he's a win over Ago Husic, who's a good fighter as well before that. And you know, when any guy is 11-0 with you know five big knockouts there at 145 pounds, I suppose you have to take notice. And you know, it might be a weird thing to say, oh, okay, he's a good boxer, you know, with all those knockouts. But like, he's not just a good boxer, though, Braga. He's very heavy hips when he gets on top too, and you know, when he needs to do it, he can do that. I think against Moraes, he showed. You know, Moraes is a funny one, right? Because he still has all the ability. It's just like his body is letting him down. But Braga showed, you know, he's able to cope with that, and he put him away. A lot of people probably would still lose to Marlon Moraes today. And, you know, I no disrespect to Marlon Moraes. I have loads of respect for him, in fact. But Braga did what he needed to do, and he beat him there. And as I said, look, he comes in here as the favourite at minus 145. But it's an interesting matchup. Like, Chris Wade is no joke, and he never has been a joke. Very good wrestling, very strong on top, but he is willing to throw. Now, will he be as willing to throw against Braga? Who knows? He is very open himself for takedowns when he throws a lot of kicks, and he has been, I think, progressively throwing more kicks, although maybe not. He didn't have much time in his last fight, but maybe not recently. It's interesting to see where that goes, because wait, look, a guy who has that much tape on him and who's been around for that long, there's kind of swings in technique or swings in tactics that you see all of the time. So what's he going to turn up with here? I suppose we'll have to wait and see. But in general, I think I might be going with Wade here, and it's not to, you know, go with the wrestler every time or anything like that, but I wonder, and you know, as I said, Braga is good on the ground, good BJJ and everything like that as well, but I just wonder, when you're coming into the playoffs, when you're like one fight away from the million, you know, this is a kind of shot to nothing for Chris Wade and short notice and all of that. I'm just going to lean towards Wade there, but it's an interesting fight, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. Then let's talk about the light heavyweights. Joshua Silveira, first of all, against Ty Flores. I'm a big fan of Joshua Silveira. When he came in on short notice last year, I spoke a little bit about him. I watched a good few of his fights, and I was thinking, this guy is This guy's a very, very good fighter. He ended up losing to Mario Akhmedov, who had a great run last year. But, he beat Martin Hamlet before that, beat Sam Kai and Dylan Monte this year. And, he's been on a great run, finished all three of those guys I mentioned there. So, very, very good. Ty Flores on the other side of it then, he's won his 2 fights this year, beat Dylan Monte and beat Dan Spahn, 2 kind of veterans. So, no shame in that. But I'm maybe not as impressed by him as I am by Silveira. Like Silveira, very well rounded, can jab, can throw his punches and all that, but is very good on the ground. His father's Conan Silveira. His jiu-jitsu is absolutely fantastic. He's dominating when he gets there. And Flores on the other side of it, not the fastest in the world. He's a good wrestler, but I don't know to see if the best cardio in the world, good on top. If you were to look at their athletic ability, I would say Silveira is probably a few steps ahead. I think Flores, it's one of those ones where you look at Silveira, and from the very first time I looked at him last year, before he came into the PFL, he's one of those fighters you just think everything comes naturally to him. And for Flores, I don't want to say the opposite, right? But it doesn't come as naturally to him. And I watched a fight last week over in Cage Warriors, James Power against Pagani, and it was not the exact same, but sometimes when you have that athletic gift or an athletic advantage, it means a whole lot. And in MMA, it's something, and I've done podcasts on this before, but like it's something we don't like to acknowledge because we look at it as a skill-based sport, and it is a skill-based sport. But when you have the athletic background or the athletic base to learn those skills from, it's a massive advantage. And I think that's exactly the advantage that Silveira has here. He's minus 465 plus 365 for Flores. And I think that line is just about right. I'm picking Joshua Silveira in that one. The other fight then is Martin Hamlet versus Impa Kasanganay. A really, really, really interesting fight, this one. Kasanganay minus 300 plus 240 for Martin Hamlet. And I'll give you my pick first. My pick is going to be Martin Hamlet, definitely at that price anyway. Now maybe I'm going full betting show here, but I think this is a bad enough matchup for Impa Kasanganay. We know what Impa can do. And sometimes you look at him and you see some of the, look, we all remember the Jackie and Buckley fight, and that it was a loss with the vaulted spinning wheel kick heard around the world. You could think, Impa Kasanganay is a striker because he was striking in that fight, but he's a well-rounded guy. He's only 2 knockouts in his 13 fights, 7 decisions and 4 submissions. I think he's just a good, well-rounded guy. He can wrestle, he can strike, he can do it all. He got a submission obviously in his last fight as well. And he's been on a very good run, 3-0 since he came into the PFL. And Hamlin on the other side of it then has been a mainstay in the PFL now for a good few years, since 2021, which 2021 feels like it's yesterday, but it is a good few years. He's had 8 or 9 fights, 10 fights maybe even since in that time, and he's won most of them. Lost to Silveira, who we just mentioned, but in between that, he's beaten Conan Silveira, beaten Mohamed Fakhrudin, beat Sam K, beat Cesar Ferreira, and also some very, very good wins in there. And I talked about Kasanganay, and I said that what he is. He's a good, well-rounded fighter. Martin Hamlet is a wrestler. He's a wrestler, and he's nothing but a wrestler. Heavy on top. And when I say nothing but a wrestler, he's stingy with his strikes as well when he does throw, but he doesn't throw it that much. He can hit hard when he wants to hit, but this is the type of fight where Martin Hamlet's going to go straight across the cage and he's going to try to take him down. If he can take him down, and he can take him down multiple times, he's going to win the fight. Like all of his fights, it's pretty simple. I think Hamlet might be a little bit underrated. Like when he gets to the very, very top, yes, then he has a problem. But is Kasanganay the very, very top? I always thought as well he's a little bit small maybe for the division. Could that play a part here as well? I don't know. But an interesting part as well here, right? we all know, I think, if Hamlet wins the wrestling battle, he's going to win the fight. Now, if Kasanganay wins the wrestling battle, not only stops up, maybe he can get on top himself. Absolutely, it's good switches around there. But who wins the striking battle? You know, like you would think Kasanganay again, but you know, to not be brought in negatively or positively into like the assumption he's a striker. You know, as I said, Hamlet can strike as well. But the one thing I would say about Hamlet, and the reason I probably would give Kasanganay the edge if it did go to the striking, is that sometimes Hamlet gets too wrestle heavy. And what I mean by that is, like, if the wrestling doesn't work, he can kind of change it. Like, look at Michael Chiesa in the UFC last week. His wrestling wouldn't work and he just panicked. Like, Hamlet doesn't get that bad. You know, that was disgraceful, and I think the way he fought Chiesa, but he does get a little bit like that. And we know Kasanganay, you know, once he gets kind of the ire up and once he gets the confidence going, he can be very, very good. So, yeah, I do, like, I started off by saying this is basically not a striker versus wrestler, but maybe it is, and maybe it turns out that way. So, I'm picking Hamlet. I'm picking Hamlet to win it, but we'll see on that one. I suppose we will see on that one. So, those are the 4 matchups we have this week in the playoffs. Let me run you through a few of the other fights here. One that sticks out is Elvis Espinoza versus Keoni Diggs. I watched a bit of Elvis this morning, and do you know who he reminds me of? Johnny Hendricks, right? And the reason he reminds me of Johnny Hendricks is, again, and there's a lot of southpaws in this, but he's a southpaw who likes a takedown, who likes a clinch, but the way he fights on the feet, it's very Johnny Hendricks-like. He does like that, the hand, and like prime Johnny Hendricks. Hand fighting, the power left inside like that, hand fight to the inside jab, hand fight to the hook around the opening hands, and then the wrestling that comes after it. Just very, very Johnny Hendricks-like. Like, scarily Johnny Hendricks like, and I wonder, I actually have it, I'm just about to check here, where does he fight out of? He fights out of Florida, so I don't know if Johnny Hendricks open a gym or anything like that, but he fights so like Johnny Hendricks. I don't know if anyone else see that either, but he's fought a few times before in the PFL, but this is a massive opportunity for him again, I suppose, to get to get to where he needs to, I suppose, next year, to get into a big tournament and get towards that million. To do that, and it's funny enough, Elvis Espinoza, his nickname is the Prodigy, and his opponent is Keoni Diggs, fighting out of from Hawaii anyway. The Prodigy, BJ Penn, and he fights a lot more like BJ Penn, I think, than Espinoza does. Southpaw as well. As I said, loads of southpaws in this. Does like a takedown. The difference, I think, between Keoni Diggs and Espinoza is they're similar enough fighters, right? As I said, southpaws like a takedown, but like to strike as well. The difference, Diggs loves a dig. You know, he loves to throw the big power shots from the outside. As I said, a little bit more like BJ Penn, more athletic, more well-rounded maybe than Espinoza. Maybe not even necessarily more well-rounded, but more kind of exciting, I suppose, is a word you could probably use. You know, he's more open, he throws more wild shots, maybe leaves himself a little bit more exposed, and if you do that against someone like Espinoza, it can be tough. So that's definitely one fight I am looking forward to there. Let me run you through some of the prices as well here, just as we go down. That Espinoza Diggs fight, Espinoza is the favourite, minus 170 plus 140 for Keoni Diggs. Big favourite Tajin over Ali. Omar minus 400 plus 300 for Omar. Desiree Yanez and Lisa Maudlin is not too far apart, minus 245 plus 195 for Maudlin. Anthony Ivy, he's a very good fighter. He's the one that caught my eye, minus 225 plus 185 for his opponent, Carson Handyman. And you know, Ivy, he maybe doesn't have the best record in the world in terms of he's 10-7 at 33 years of age, but you know, he has some tough opponents in there. You know, he had a few fights in the UFC. He fought Brian Barberena. You know, he fought Basile Hafez, who we saw in the UFC not too long ago in Fury FC, but he's won his last 2 in a row now. Has a pretty good finishing record in terms of 100% finishing record, 10 fights, 10 finishes. Even in his losses, he's 5 of 7 have been inside the distance. And his opponent, Carson Hardman, 28 years of age, fighting out of Excite. He's won his last 3 in a row as well, but he's lost to the likes of Steven Seiler in 2021, lost to Clay Collard, who obviously we see in here before as well. I do like Ivy in that fight, having the bit of watching, but you never know, maybe at that stage of their career, with this big opportunity as well, what way I suppose it's going to go for some of these. Chelsea Hackett as well, -120, -110 for Kai Bennett. And then we have a very interesting fight. This might be my fight of the undercard here. Billy Elekana against Chuck Campbell, -220 for Billy, +180 for Chuck Campbell. 5-1 for Billy, 5-2 for Chuck Campbell. First of all, in Chuck Campbell, he fought for the Cage Warriors light heavyweight title last time out against Modestas Bukauskas, and it feels like a long time ago. It's only 8 months ago, but I just kind of assumed he'd been back in there since. And, Modestas Bukauskas obviously went to the UFC after that. And I remember talking about it here, maybe on a podcast not too long ago, that, maybe Chuck Campbell could get the next shot at that belt. But now he's gone to the PFL and he's a big opportunity there. It's funny, like he's fought in Bellator, he's fought in Cage Warriors, he's now fighting in the PFL, and he's only 8 fights into his career. I think he should be called Chuck the Chasing Pack Campbell, because he's fought all over us. But he is a very good fighter, he's funny, 5 fights, he's only 2 knockouts for a light heavyweight. But watching his fights, and I've watched a good bit of him now at this stage, he does hit very hard, fighting out of AK as well, a very well-rounded fighter. He went 4 rounds at Modestas Bukauskas, and look, he did well early, and Bukauskas kind of, cleaned him out in the end, but still, for a guy that new into his career, I think it was pretty good. And he's fought Tyree Fortune in Bellator before. That was a good fighter, beating the likes of Andy Clamp, who is a good guy who's been around for a long time. But his opponent, Billy Elekana, fighting out in Uprising MMA from California, he's a guy who I'm looking at his Sherdog here. He made his pro debut in 2021, but he's been fighting in amateurs and stuff for a long time. And some of the guys he's been due to fight as an amateur and has fought as an amateur, it's mad to read it. He fought Brian Battle as an amateur. He fought Sullivan Cawley as an amateur. He was due to fight Dalton Rosta as an amateur. So that's where this guy comes from. I watched one of his fights from a good while ago, and it must have been an amateur fight. I didn't realize when I was watching it, but he absolutely destroyed this lad. I think it was Cole. I know who was it. It was a tough enough fight. I'm not sure exactly the name, but he just absolutely went through him. Absolutely went through him. This guy is like a proper top athlete, really good. Now Chuck Campbell's a good athlete as well, but Billy Elekana is an A1 level athlete. That's the first thing you notice about him when you look at him. He hits hard, he moves well, fights southpaw again, fighting out of that kind of unorthodox stance, the sideways stance. And honestly, I cannot wait for this. I cannot wait for this. Elekana is, it's funny because like they're 5-1 against 5-2, but these guys have a good amount of experience now against top guys. Elekana not so much as a pro, but he's fought in LFA a good few times and stuff, and that's a pretty big stage, and he's had 1 fight in PFL now as well. But the amateurs, he's had good matchups there, and Chuck Campbell has had it through his whole career, I suppose, as happens with a top 205 prospect. The -220 against Elekana, I haven't watched him this morning. I'm like, well, yeah, he probably should be that, but Chuck Campbell, I think Chuck's bit of extra professional experience, I think it'll really show here. I really do think it will show. Will I be picking him a +180? I don't know. I think, do you know what I will? I'm going to go with Chuck Campbell, but it's a very close one. It's such an interesting fight, this one, and I can't wait to see it. So yeah, that's the top and bottom of this card. Maybe there aren't the standout names in this card like we would be maybe hoping for, but there are some good fights on the undercard coming up. I actually think the 4 playoff fights are going to be very, very, very interesting. So definitely a card to tune in for and watch. So yeah, I will leave it there. I'll be back. I think it's 2 weeks' time until the next PFL event. So I will be back then for my next PFL preview. But keep it locked here on Sherdog.com, on the YouTube. Please give a subscribe, give a like button, smash that like button, as they say. And let everyone know. I will leave it there. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com. And I'll see you all next time.